everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Purpose and Profit Sisterhood. I'm your hostess with the very mostest, Jeanette Anderson, and today I'm here with the fabulous and lovely Jennifer Bennett, who is what's your official title? CEO, Chief Bottle Washer?
Yep.
Yes,
Yes.
CEO of
Yes.
Get Desky, which is a VA agency that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But she's been in business for a long time, and we're talking about how to delegate to elevate today. And so we're going to talk about that. But I also want to talk about this interesting, fascinating little side fact that she started her business with her mom, who is now 67, and they've been working together for a long time. How long have you guys been working together?
We've been working together since I first got my real estate license when I was 23. We kind of learned that we could work together. And so when I needed help in my real estate, she would help me do that. And then over the course of the span of that, she always wanted us to start an official business together. And so 3 years ago, we launched Get Desky together as co-founders.
Cool.
Um,
Okay. That's a very fascinating story, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But let me tell you the official info on Jennifer, and then we're going to get into finding out the behind the scenes tidbits that you wouldn't necessarily guess from her website or her bio. So Jennifer is a strong advocate for work-life balance and is truly passionate about supporting moms and women in business in their journey to achieving their business goals. Balancing the demands of work and personal life can be quite a challenge. We were just talking about that before the podcast, but it's a mission I wholeheartedly embrace. She wholeheartedly embraces. She believes that with the right strategies and support, anyone can strike that perfect balance and make their entrepreneurial dreams a reality. I love that. And we were talking about balance and how challenging it can be to run a business, be a mom, have, a house to take care of, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So tell us something about you that we wouldn't guess from reading your bio or whatever that might surprise people.
oh my goodness. Um, I don't do all the housework myself.
Ah,
Majority of the cooking is actually done by my husband. He actually adores cooking, and so the norm most of the time is that if the person that is the stay-at-home worker or the stay-at-home parent is that they do everything. In my household, that's not the case. We really serve up who's the best at it, and my husband cooks a lot better than I do. So uh, I let him just fully take the reins of it, and it is saves a lot of mental stress in that capacity.
good. Well, and it's often, I think it's critical to do that because just because you're working at home doesn't mean you have any less of a job than someone who goes out of the house to their work. And so it needs to be treated as as full-time and as important as the other person's job. So yeah, that's very important. So how did you decide to get started with Get Desky with your mom? What was that journey?
So so my mom we had been talking about starting a business together, and we were like, we should do e-commerce, we should do this, we should do that. And really, when we sat down and got down to the nitty-gritty of the skills and the gifts that we could share with the world, um, it really came down to taking my social media and my marketing brain and my fun and my wit and her running the back end of my dad's consulting business for so long that we were like, why don't we just take the desk work from people who they start this business and it takes a life of their own, that we have just developed so many skills to be able to do something efficiently and take that away from the people that they've started their business and they didn't start their business to do all the bookkeeping. They didn't start it to do all of the, you know, tracking the KPIs. They didn't start it to be a social media manager. They didn't start it to be a content creator. They didn't start it to lead generate or any of these things like that. Why don't we just take that from them so that they could stay where their zone of genius is?
Hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like you guys have a very diverse background between the two of you to cover off a lot of the requirements and really understanding entrepreneurial challenges, which is that most entrepreneurs hate doing all those things you just mentioned or suck at
Yeah.
or both. And so tell me what you mean by work-life balance. What's your definition of that?
It's not the rigorous like schedule of, oh, from like 5:30 to 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm gonna eat my breakfast. It's looking at the priorities that you have set for yourself and saying, okay, this is the most important thing that I need to get done today. Is by 7:20, I'm out the door, my kid gets to school, and making sure that all of the work still gets done, and while giving myself grace to where if a deadline isn't for another month or so, I'm not stressing that it has to be done now. So it's really setting yourself up for success. And what does that really look like? Okay, I got a load of laundry done
Mhm.
today, and my kid is at school. That's a win for me, not alone all of my clients are taken care of. So it's really, what does the schedule look like for you that's going to set you up for success? That could be, some people like to work more at night. Some like to work more in the morning. I'm a morning person, so I like to get up early, get all of my stuff done. And then I get the evenings with my family.
And that makes sense. It's part of what you just said at the end there is know what your rhythm is and accommodate your rhythm so that you're not trying to fit some kind of cookie cutter definition of what balance is. And I think, for I personally think that balance is probably a myth because there's times where you've got a family and so there's more requirement on the family side. I don't, and so I have more time to work on my business. And so balance for me is more time spent there, right? Because
Okay.
that's the age and stage that I'm at. But if I had a family, then there would be different priorities. So I think it really changes over the years and the decades.
Yeah.
Depends on where you're at with life, what balance looks like for you. Because sometimes being all in can be balanced, as long as we're not driving ourselves to distraction. What's the biggest mistake that you've seen most entrepreneurs making when it comes to trying to delegate or get team built or starting to see if they can get things off their plate? What's the biggest mistake that you see that they make?
They wait too late.
Mm-hmm.
They wait too late. I just read a statistic that 87% of small businesses in the United States are non-employment small businesses, meaning that they are one-man shows.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about that, they're waiting way too late, and you couple that with within the first 5 year, in the fifth year of their business, 50% of them will fail. So when you couple those two together, I mean, they're setting themselves up for failure if they're not finding ways to get themselves out of daily tasks. Yes, they're needle moving daily tasks, but if they are not high level, read it and approve it and keep going, then you're setting yourself up to burn out and be one of those statistics in the fifth year, because you can only do so much in a day.
Yeah.
Um, so it's not starting soon enough.
Excuse me. I still have a cold, hence all the nose blowing and everything. Um, so what would you say to people? Because I know you get this all the time, who say, "But I can't afford to hire a team because can't. I don't have the cash flow for that." So because we want to start earlier and hire earlier, but that's one of the biggest objections. So what do you say to people about that?
Um, the cash flow that you're worried about is, if it's only dependent on you, is always going to be restricted. So if every single cash flow activity is only dependent on one person, there's never going to be a diversity of the cash flow to
Right.
come in. Um, because again, you're only one person. If you're a one man show, there's only so many emails you could do a day. There's only so many phone calls you could do a day. There's only so many comments, likes, all the stuff on Facebook that you could do a day. There's only so much content you could create in a day. There's only so many lives you could do in a day. So you're really limiting the amount of cash flow that you could make.
Well, and if you're busy doing all those things instead of revenue earning activities like coaching or speaking or doing whatever you do that you sell, then it's taking money away from what you could be bringing in, even as a
Yes.
solopreneur, right? So you're not leveraging
Yes.
it. So how do you suggest that people make the leap? Like, how do they, if they're, because one of the big mistakes is they bring in, they just, people say, oh, you need a VA, but they don't necessarily know what to do or to delegate. So how do you recommend people get started?
So I think it really depends on what you want them to do. And it goes back to setting them up for success. So if you're going to hire a VA, taking the time to sit down and say, what does success look like in the task XYZ they're going to do? And that could mean recording a Loom video. That could mean, using Scribe How. That could be sitting down and writing out like what that looks like. Because 9 times out of 10, when people hire a VA, and a lot of them are fabulous, but the problem that happens is one is they've never hired somebody, so they don't know how to approach someone when they do something wrong, but they aren't giving them steps ahead of time of how to do something successful. And so really thinking through, like, if I want my 8-year-old to help me do the laundry, yeah, I could go in there and I could tell her, put the clothes in the washing machine, but she's going to put it in there and she's not going to know, well, you need to wash your regular clothes on cold and, and then rinse and then have a rinse cycle to make sure all the stuff is out. But if I go and I have the little flip book that I have that says, okay, well, this is the type of clothes it is. Okay, this is the setting you put it on. These are the things that you do. Now I've set her up for success. So sometimes it's taking that time to make sure that you're fully getting out of your brain what success really looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. So and writing that down, documenting that so that you can give it to that person. Um, and how would you recommend? Well, actually, let's just talk about the difference between an agency like yours and going and hiring someone, a VA or a resource or a graphic designer or whoever on Fiverr or Upworks or any of those kinds of services. What would you say is the primary differences between the two?
So with our agency, our model is quite a bit different than a lot of even VA agencies out there. So a lot of VA agencies, you could go to them and they're essentially just a recruitment service where you could go and you could say, I need a VA to do XYZ. They're going to recruit resumes and then go through them and say, hey, here are our top picks. With us, you actually not only get a team of 5 people, but you also get the management of those people. So it kind of eliminates the management and the constant need for the SOPs, which are standard operating procedures. Um, for that staff. So we have our staff has been with us for about 3 years. Some of them have came in the last year and a half, but several of our people have been here from the very beginning with us. And so we have taught them how to use a lot of the tools, a lot of the marketing strategies, things like that. And so you don't really have to train them. We just have to get to know your brand and your voice to be able to take over. So that's the biggest difference between us and a lot of agencies. Now, when you're talking about going to Fiverr, those people just post on there and they say, "Hey, I know how to do these." You could get some that have done hundreds of people, or you could get some that are new and they say, "Hey, I know how to log in and I know how to navigate my way around here." And then you're having to go through and you're going to have to interview those people. Are their personalities going to work with your business? Do their core values line with your business? So you're going to really have to trust that those people know and are going to do a good job. And you're going to also have to set them up for success, and that could take longer.
And yeah, having done both, I know there's lots and lots of pros and cons. The temptation is to just go with Fiverr, Upworks, or something like that because it's cheaper, and it requires a lot more training, a lot more management. So speaking of managing teams, what are some of the tools you recommend? Because I literally just had a conversation with a client this morning, and he's been challenged with people that he's doing contras with not showing up and doing the work. And so we talked about setting expectations and managing those by having a tracking system. So and talk to him a little bit about, Asana and how to have a tracking system that would support them. What would you tell entrepreneurs around managing expectations and the process with a team?
Yeah, so the first thing you want to do is always manage the expectations. And I have found through this journey, and even when I was managing teams for my real estate, was the first expectation you have to manage is yourself. Um, so when something goes wrong, it doesn't matter what it is, you always need to take time to self-reflect. Did I set this person up for the best success possible? And so you always take ownership in that. And then the next thing is you always want to sit down and review together. Okay, where is the disconnect? Like I I thought I was clear. What did you think about this? So it's always an open dialogue. And then the last thing is we have something similar to your client. We have ClickUp. And so it is the expectation that, they do log in there, they do see their work, they do know their expectation, and they know that I could see everything that they're doing, the work that's being completed. And so there is the expectation of knowing that it's going to be checked, and that if it's not, that there is repercussions. You do have to set them up and say, hey, if your work is not done or it's not done on time or things like that, you have to set up the expectation ahead of time that you're not going to get paid. There's going to be, these repercussions. You have to let them know. It's just like children. If you don't clean your room, your friend's not going to get to come over, you know? And these are real discussions that I have with my kids. Like, you want your friend to come over, your room's got to be clean. So it's the same thing. It's it if you want to get paid, this is the work that we expect you to do. This is the hours that our office is. If it's a contractor, you kind of have to, strike that balance of you can't dictate their work schedule, but you could dictate performance indicators, and just setting those up and really making sure that they define when work needs to be done, when it needs to be completed. Every one of our tasks in there has a start date and a due date. And so we make sure that it's pretty clear.
Mm. Well, and speaking of that, because again, that was the conversation I was having with my client this morning. He hadn't set up any kind of measures or objectives. How do you recommend that people, when you say delegate, what does that include? What does, if I'm going to delegate a job area or a task or a project to someone, what does that mean to you?
So the first thing that means to me is that if I give it to you, that means you have ownership of it. That means you are in charge of it. And my ownership of that is to make sure that you have every tool available for success. Does that mean that you need access to Facebook? Does that mean that you need access to the statistics? Does that mean that you need access to Canva? Does that mean you need access to XYZ? But it is ultimately your responsibility to say, hey, I have access to these tools, but I need access to this. And my team knows this very well. And if they don't have something, they will ping me until I give it to them.
Mhm. Yeah. So setting them up for success, but also, how do you define a scope of work or a role or a task? So maybe not the tasks, but let's say someone's bringing on a VA. What are some of the things that you give them in terms of, like, like I'm thinking like a job description, metrics? How do you set KPIs? What are some of those things that you set up with a client with their first BA, let's say?
Yeah. So it depends on what they're hiring us for. So a lot of our clients, they have us managing their communities. They have us helping them with their content and things like that. And so we set up custom KPIs. So it can be different for every client that we have
Mhm.
um, because we infuse our whole staff into their business. And so we set up custom KPIs and we will give them reports for those. So if one person says, I need 100 community members by Friday and it starts on Monday, then we go through and we say, okay, how do we make sure that we get 100 community new members each week? What is that? Where do we find those? How do we find those? How do we message those people? How do we nurture those people? All those different things. And so it goes back to defining um, what's working. And so we will literally go through and find all those people, say, okay, it's in XYZ groups. We're going to invite those, and then we're going to follow through with those people. If it's content, how much content do they want us to post a week? Is it once a day? Is it twice a day? Is it 3 times a day? Okay, well, what kind of content does that need to be? It goes through the pillars. And so it really depends on what they're hiring us for as to what the scope of work is. But it goes into that detailed list of what is their goals? What do they want us to do?
Right. Right. And one of the things that we were talking about this morning is making sure they're aware of the bigger picture, the vision, the mission of the company, and your cause or your why. Then what is the job description? So what are they responsible for? And then what are the measures or the objectives? What are the objectives that we want them to accomplish? So like you said, well, the overall objective is to grow the Facebook group by 1,000 people this year. And that means adding at least 100 a month or whatever the case may be. And objective 2, 3, 4, and then the tasks, like you were just saying, really making sure that they've got what they need and that those tasks are being measured. So having all of those pieces in place. And my client said, man, that's a lot of work. And I said, yes, it is. And it's work you're going to continue to do if you don't figure out how to delegate it.
Yep.
So that's a really big piece of it too, is a lot of people have a hard time letting go. Because they think it will take longer to train someone than to do it themselves. So what would you
It's going
say?
to take longer to grow if you don't.
Yes, that's true. That's true. And what would you say to those people who say, "Oh, it takes so long to train people, and you just get them trained and then they leave or whatever." So yes, it takes longer to grow, but what else would you tell them around that? Because I know that's a really common belief. I've had that belief.
Yes. The other common belief, and I think Gary Vee talks about this a lot, is that no one can do it 100% like you. So there's, this thing of like people are they have this business and they have this baby and they love it and they fully believe in it. And it is true. No one is going to be 100% bought in like you are. They're
Mhm.
not. But if you could bring somebody in that's 30% and move them from 30% to 70% in a consistent basis, you're going to be able to grow faster than if it's just a one-man show.
Yeah.
And so allowing yourself to let go of those things, it's pivotal to the growth of your business. I mean, all the influencers that 90% of us entrepreneurs follow, none of them did it alone.
Yeah.
None of them.
Yes, that's right. They can't. Well, and I used to kind of joke with people back when Martha Stewart was far more prevalent than she is now. But, they used to compare themselves to her. And I said, yeah, but she has a staff of 300. You don't. So she has an incredible house and an amazing garden, and she does all these things, and it makes it look so easy with her staff of 300. And you couldn't begin to compete with her, um, on your own. Like, it's just not possible. So what would you say is one of the best pieces of advice you have around delegation, um, one of the things that I've learned for myself is that I've sometimes confused delegation with abdication. I tend to, if someone's giving me a task, don't give me a bunch of stuff, don't micromanage me, just tell me where you want me to go and I'll get there. And I therefore think people are like me, but they're not. And so it's taken me quite a while to get that I really do have to give people a lot more supervision, a lot more information, a lot more training, and a lot more clarity and management than I would ever want, right? I would be so annoyed if people did with me what I'm need to do with my people. And it's necessary. Like they can't succeed if I don't do that with them. Sorry, just trying to get my lip.
Yeah.
And so I, one of the things that I learned is I can't delegate like I would want someone to delegate to me. Stupid light. And I also used to think that delegation was like I hand the ball off and then I forget about it. I'd leave them to do their thing and they would not do their thing. Right. So, what would you say is some of the important things to remember around delegation?
Yeah. So one, I'm just like you. Like I don't want give me the stuff and let me just like go and do my own research. I'm very resourceful with the coaches that I've had for me to help me grow. And they're like, dang, you're so resourceful. But I have found that staffs are not that way too. And so one of the things that I have found that works really well is one, cultivating a collaboration times, where your teams can come together and brainstorm together and say, hey, I have XYZ for this client. Give me some ideas. Like I am stuck. And so one of the things that we do on our staff calls every Tuesday is we go through all of the clients. We talk about them, like their wins, their struggles, like what can we do better? Um, and that allows us to be able to have that full blown collaboration of, this is not a place of judgment. This is not a place to be shamed, but like, hey, come and say, hey, I need to get, three more people for this person. What is a different idea?
Mhm.
Um, and the other thing is going back to having a task manager. If you actually set up your task manager right, and you're going through and you're reviewing their work, you're not going to have to feel like a micromanager because you've set up the expectation of there's a task manager, the tasks are in there and they're set up correctly. If you're not doing it and I have to keep reminding you, that means that there's something else. That means that I'm not giving you the proper tools or you're not properly communicating with me that there's something you need. Um, and that's a different conversation.
Mhm.
Um, so I would really take time to dive in and see why are we having to micromanage? Because I hate micromanaging. I am a big proponent of like coming together with my staff and saying, how can I set you up for success? And I will ask them that, how can I set you up for success? What do you need to complete this with excellence? And then when they complete it, I will wait and I will ask them, do you feel like this is your best that you could do?
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that because I want to make them second guess themselves. I'm saying that because I want them to always think, is the best level of work that I can do?
Mhm. Yeah, it's creating a culture of excellence by having that question there, ongoingly.
Yeah.
That.
Steve Jobs did that, by the way. I stole it from him. It's his
Ah,
saying.
well, that's a good place to steal from, I think, because results they seem to have done a pretty good job. All right, so you have a gift for people, so tell us about that. The hiring handbook.
Yes. So people wanted to know, how do I find my people and how do I hire them? And some of the things that I do is that are not normal is I actually pay people to interview with me, which
Oh.
is outside the norm. Everybody says, "Oh, well," and I see it all the time, and I'm sure you see it in some of the groups of, you know, these people want me to do like a 20-hour project or whatever just to be able to interview with them. And I'm like, why? Like, why do these people need to do this, big extravagant project for that? So if I do have something like that that I want to do, I will pay these people to interview, you
Okay.
know? Um,
And so that is very unusual. And do you have them do a project for you before you hire them?
Um, I do, but if I'm looking for like a specific project, because I did one time, I had a very specific project and I knew it was going to take a lot more than like 5 hours. It was going to take a lot of time. I paid the people that submitted a resume um that wanted to do the project. I paid them.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's just one of the things because I believe it's become the standard of, hey, these people are desperate. They'll do work for free just to be able to get employment.
Yeah.
And so that was my way of kind of combating that is saying, hey, if somebody's going to spend more than an hour or two on something, pay them. I mean, even if it's $20 for
Right.
2 hours, that's $10 an hour.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of fair, especially if they're doing work. But I do make sure, and I do the same thing, but I hire maybe two or three people. Like if I'm hiring off of Desky or sorry, Upworks
Fiverr.
or something,
Yeah.
I will hire two or three people with the same instructions and to create for instance, a speaker one sheet I've done this with, and or an ebook, and tell them they've got a budget of 20 or $30 or whatever it may be that is typical for that kind of work, and then see who delivers the best, what their communications like, etc. Because all contractors are not created the same, which is one of the advantages of going through an agency like yours, is you don't have to go through that filtering process, which is
Right.
big amount of work, really, and finding the right people, and getting them on the bus, trained, et cetera, et cetera. Uh,
Right.
so, what is the ebook that you have, or the digital copy of your book? It's called The Hiring Handbook: A Guide to Knowing When and How to Hire the Right Individuals, right?
Yes.
Okay, and what is the? I mean, the title's fairly self evident, but what would you say? Who are the kinds of people who are most going to benefit from reading this?
Um, these are the stressed out entrepreneurs. These are the people that they know they need to hire, but they don't know how to get started. It's gonna shift their mindset a little bit, um, of how to hire. And it's also going to set them up to start thinking about tasks that they could start offloading right away, to be able to get some of that work off of their plate.
Yeah, for sure. So Pamela Riley just said, I get it. I'll stay a solopreneur until I hire help so I can become a business owner. Um, and the thing that I hope you heard from Jennifer is, don't wait too long to do that. And
No,
because otherwise you end up
the
being,
statistics are not in your favor to do that.
yeah,
And I'm sure they're similar in Canada because usually the US and Canada with their statistics, even with business, is relatively close. So I haven't looked up the Canadian ones, but
yeah.
I'm sure they're pretty high for the solopreneurs that in year five, because you can only sustain doing everything yourself for so long.
Yes, exactly. Well, and it constrains the amount of time that you have to focus on things like business development, sales, and getting that done. Because the number one thing a business owner has to do is drive revenue. Everything else
Right.
is secondary. Because if you don't
Yes.
have revenue, you don't have a need for marketing funnels and social media posts and so forth. So I think that's often overlooked by a lot of business owners. They think their number one job is to deliver the product or service. It's not. It's to make the sale so that you have a product or service to deliver. Other,
Right. And really defining what your sales process looks like, and documenting it. what works, what doesn't work, and down to like the words that your audience resonates with and the words that your audience doesn't resonate with, because at a certain point, sales is no longer your job.
Hmm.
Sales is your job to oversee, and it's your job to oversee the sales KPI metrics of your job. It's not your job to actually be the salesperson.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. To make sure that you get it done. And initially, if you have to do it, you do it, but then you got to make sure that you get it done because that's otherwise you're
Yeah.
not busy working on your business. All right. I'm just checking to see if anybody has any specific questions for you before we let you go. But I put the link in there and you can go and you go to getdesky.com. So GETDESKY.com, the dash hiring dash handbook. So the dash hiring dash handbook, to download that ebook, and you put in your information, it gets sent to your email. And so that will be very helpful. I'm going to go look at it myself because I'm in the process of turning over some team members, bringing new ones on. I've been trying to find the right technical resource for quite a while, and went through an agency, and the first person they gave me is not the right person. Fortunately, this time it took me 2 months to fire them versus 2 years for the previous one, because I kept trying to get it to work and didn't want to train someone new. And finally, it was just like, you know what? It's not working. I need to start over. And so now
Right.
I'm starting over again, but this time it'll be 2 weeks before if it's not working instead of 2 months. It just takes time to get them onboarded and clear, and then, see if it's working. Um,
Right.
but yeah, it's absolutely critical because I'm not doing that technical stuff and it needs to be done. So, okay. Any last words of advice for people? Anything else you want to leave people with?
Um, I think the biggest thing that I would encourage entrepreneurs to do is, one, is to know your numbers, and two, uh, you don't have to hustle all the time.
Mm.
You know, um, we always talk about, hitting the grind hard. Um, and yes, I do that. I do get up at 4:30, but I actually don't start work until like 9. So, um, and I'm out of the office by 6. So, um, set up yourself for success, how whatever your day looks like for that, so that every day does not feel like a chore.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, 4:30, that made me just whinge. Um, not for everybody, not for the faint of heart, that's for sure.
Well, I do that because my husband leaves by 5:30, and so it's a way for us to be able to connect and see each other in the morning before chaos of his work, my work, the kids, and everything else. So that's why I get up that early.
All right. And by the way, just as a quick aside, what would you say to anyone who's thinking about going into business with a family member? Because you've got a lot of experience on that. So,
I do actually. I'm a third generation entrepreneur. My mother worked with her mother
oh,
when she owned a bar. So I would say it's not for everyone. Um, if you can reasonably separate family time and business time, and you can tolerate your mother or your father or your sister or brother or whoever it is having a totally different opinion than you, and you still being okay with it,
mhm.
then I would say yes. It's definitely not for everybody. My cousin can work really great with his mom, but he can't work with his dad. So really take the time and make sure that it's not going to fray your relationship. Me and my mother have a really great relationship, and we're able to separate this. This is business. We don't talk shop when we're with our family at all.
Mm,
And so that really helps us with that. So we don't bring in our husbands and my kids into shop talk because they're going to be like, "What the hell?"
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, and you have to be prepared for the tough decisions too. And I've had many different kinds of jobs. And at one point, I was working as a camp cook up in forestry camps and so forth. And I hired my mother as an assistant cook. Um, and so she came up and she couldn't hack it. She couldn't cut it. And so I was picking up a lot of the slack for quite a long time. And finally, I had to fire my mother because she just wasn't doing the work. And so don't go into family if you're not prepared to fire your mother. Because it's don't go into business with family if you're not prepared for that, because it may not work and you cannot let the business suffer because of, concerns around
Yeah.
economics and so forth. So yeah, really talk about that and be prepared.
Yeah, and one of the things that me and my mother did very early on is we set up expectations of office hours, and that really helped us too because we didn't want to be at the Christmas table, talking about get desky stuff when we're supposed to be enjoying Christmas or Thanksgiving or Halloween or whatever it is, kids' birthdays. We really so we define that like this, you don't call me at 5 o'clock in the morning because you need to say, so and so's payment didn't process or whatever. But you call me at 5 o'clock in the morning and you want to talk about, dad's birthday that's coming up, and so we define things like that. And so that really helps out too when you're not only just working with a family member, but just a partner in general. Because you got to remember that other person has feelings and boundaries and things like that, and you've got to get them out. And then you have to remind them sometimes, I have to tell my mom because my mom stays up late. My mom stays up till like 10 o'clock at night. And so sometimes she doesn't check some of her stuff until late and she'll message me and I'll be like, hey, I'll get back to that tomorrow.
Mm,
And so it's also being able to lovingly remind them, hey, this isn't the time to talk about that, without you getting offended as
exactly.
well too.
Well, and all of that applies equally to your team as well, whether they're related to you or not. You need to set boundaries
Right,
along with expectations. So, because that keeps everyone happy and on track and on the same page and communicate about what's working and
right,
not working. So, great
right.
advice, Jennifer. Thank you so much for being here. And I really appreciate your passion for supporting entrepreneurs in getting the things off their plate that shouldn't be on their plate and helping them to, really be more effective in what they're doing. It's a wonderful thing to have people who want to support us in what we're doing and being the difference that we can be. So thank you for that. So again, if you want to grab Jennifer's book, I highly recommend it. It's called, or you go to getdesky, GETDESKY.com, the dash hiring dash handbook. And of course, I'm assuming they can find more information about you and your services on the website as well, right?
Yes, they can. And they can also reach out to me and schedule a call as well. I'm always happy to take calls for people that want to talk more about how do I really do that?
Yeah. How do I make this leap? Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And happy leaping, everyone. Hey, it's 2024, or as I call it, 2020 soar. And one of the things that we cannot do is soar unless we have some wind underneath our wings. And so that means getting support. So call in support, whether it's a supportive team, a coach, people who are going to help you with money, with funding, whatever that may be. Call in support so that this can be 2020 SOAR for you. Speaking of support, please join our Facebook group, the Purpose and Profit Sisterhood. That is a community where we gather. You can ask questions, share content, promote yourselves on Wednesdays, and really just get lifted up by other women who are also learning to soar or soaring in their business as well. Thanks for being here, everybody. See you next week. Bye-bye.